Ballistus dreadnoughts are walking gun emplacements, and at these combat walkers' core lies the mortal remains of a fallen chapter hero. In this guide, we'll be showing you how to paint this Ballistus dreadnought in the colours of the Ultramarines, ready to assist your forces on the battlefield in no time. If you're new to painting, you can check out the Citadel Colour Painting Essentials videos to learn all about it. The paints we've used in this guide are listed on screen now. Remember, we're painting in the colours of the Ultramarines, but you can choose to paint your miniatures however you like. Also on screen now is any additional equipment we've used. This includes brushes and mediums. But feel free to use whatever brushes you're most comfortable with. And if you don't have mediums at home, you can switch these out with water instead. So to start off this guide, we've undercoated the model, and for this we've used Macragge Blue. This will give us a great head start on the armour plates. You'll also need a pot of Macragge Blue to hand, as this will help us tidy up any mistakes later on. Now the first thing we're going to do is paint in all of the black areas using Abaddon Black. Now there are quite a lot of these areas, so just take your time and work your way around the miniature. Refer to the box art if you're unsure of where to place any colours. You can use something like a medium base brush on those larger areas, but for the trickier to reach areas, it might be best to switch to something like a medium layer brush. We do want to try and be as neat as we can, as it will save us time if we don't have to tidy up too much later on. However, mistakes can always be tidied up. Just thin down some Macragge Blue and use that to cover any mistakes. Now we'll be using Leadbelcher for all of the silver areas. Again, this is quite a large stage, so just take your time, it's definitely worth the effort. Leadbelcher is a metallic base paint, so we need to add it to the palette and add some water to it to thin it down. Doing this builds the paint up in several layers and avoids clogging up any fine detail with one thick coat. Once we've finished this stage, these are the two largest areas finished. So we can move on to adding some extra details now. And once you've finished using metallic paints, it's always a good idea to change your paint water. This will stop any of those shiny flakes getting into your non-metallic paints. The next paint we're going to use is Corax White, and we're using a medium layer brush for these areas. So we've got some white details that we can just paint in. Again, thin your paint down and apply a few layers. Now you'll notice on the box art that there's a big white stripe on this miniature. We're going to show you how to do that now. So the first thing we're going to do is use a pencil to carefully mark out a rough outline of where we want that stripe to be. Don't worry, it doesn't have to be perfect. We'll be able to tidy up later and help to straighten it out. We'll also add some scratches later, which will help to hide any wiggly lines. If you've got masking tape at home, you might want to mask off the area as well. However, most people have got a pencil, so that's what we're using for this example. Once you've roughly marked out the area with a pencil, we can start blocking it in with Corax White. Make sure your paint's quite thin here, as this will help us tidy up any mistakes. Just build up the layers until you've blocked in that section and you've got a full coverage. If you need to, take some thinned down Macragge Blue and just tidy up those edges to help straighten out the lines a bit. Once we're happy, we'll then add some thin scratches with Macragge Blue. This can be used to help tidy up any wiggly lines and also add a little bit of weathering and interest to the miniature. On the back of the miniature, there's a Mechanica symbol, and this is a black and white design. So we're just going to carefully block in that pattern and build up the layers until we've got a full coverage. Again, we can tidy up with the previous colours. So we can take some Abaddon Black and just neaten up that line if we need to. Now we're going to use Mephiston Red to paint in any of the red details. Just work your way around the miniature, picking out those various details we can see on the box art. This will be things like the purity seal wax and the pipes. You might want to switch to a small layer brush here, as some of these details are quite intricate. And again, don't worry, you can always tidy up any mistakes with the previous colours. Just make sure to thin your paint first. Now there's quite a lot of parchment on the miniature, and for this we're going to paint it using Wraithbone. Again, stick with that small layer brush, as this will help us have more control of the paint. So just thin your paint down and apply a few layers, taking care around any details we've already painted. This is quite a pale colour, so it will take quite a few coats to cover over that blue undercoat. Make sure you allow each layer to dry fully before applying the next one. And once that's done, you can see that this miniature is really starting to come together. Next up, we'll base coat the grey areas using Celestra Grey. This will be details like the rocks on the base and the Crux Terminatus. Apply this just like all your other base coats. It's quite normal for paint to separate in the pot when it's been stood for a while, so be sure to give it a good shake before you open it and apply it to a miniature. Now we've just got some yellow areas to paint, and we'll use Avalon Sunset for these. This will be things like the lamp and the pipes. You might find that you get some of that yellow onto the silver details of the lamp. Don't worry, just wait for it to dry and then go back in with some Leadbelcher and tidy up the area. Again, a small airbrush is probably best here, as this will give us the most control on the miniature. Once that's done, nearly all our base coats are finished, just some more metallic areas to go. Now it's time to bring that mighty Ultramarines colour scheme together, so we'll be adding the gold now using Retributor armour. Just like with all your other base paints, thin it down on your palette and apply a few layers. Be careful not to make your paint too watery when you're thinning it down. This will cause the paint to separate when we apply it to the miniature. It'll probably take around 2 coats to get full coverage with this colour. And the last base coat we'll be applying is Balthasar Gold. We'll use this to pick out the last few metallic areas on the miniature. Adding this gold in just adds a little bit of variety to those metallics, and we'll be applying the same wash over both areas later. This will help to tie everything together. And once that's done, all of our base coats are finished. So now we can move on to applying some shades and contrasts. The first shade we're going to use is Agrax Earthshade, and we'll be using this with Lahmian Medium to achieve a couple of different effects. So to start off with, thin Agrax Earthshade down with Lahmian Medium. So that will be 1 part medium to 1 part Agrax Earthshade. Then we'll be carefully applying this onto any parchment. When you're applying a shade, apply it heavily and neatly, taking care to control any excess pooling that we can see. If you find that there is too much shade sitting on any of the surfaces or in the recesses, just clean off your brush and use that to soak up any excess. Thinning a shade down just means it's a little bit more subtle when we apply it to the miniature. This avoids overpowering any of those pale base coats. It also helps to avoid it sitting on any of those raised surfaces too much. We'll also be applying this thinned down version of Agrax Earthshade to the yellow and the red details. Then we'll take it straight from the pot and apply it to both the Retributor armour and the Balthasar Gold areas. This will add loads of depth and interest to the miniature. And applying the same shade over both of these areas helps to tie everything together. And next we'll be using Basilicanum Grey and Contrast Medium. Again, we'll be thinning this down to achieve a few different effects. First of all, we'll take 1 part Contrast Medium to 1 part Basilicanum Grey. We'll thin it on the palette and then apply it over the silver and the grey details. Now you might notice that Basilicanum Grey is a contrast paint, but when we thin it down, we can use it as a shade too. Using a paint like this in a variety of different ways allows us to achieve lots of different effects on our miniatures, and it's the best way to get the most out of one paint. Once all those areas are finished, we'll then take the paint straight from the pot, and we'll be doing something called a recess shade. This is where we just carefully drop the shade or the contrast paint into any recesses on the miniature. So in this case, we'll be looking for all the armour panel lines, and we'll just carefully drop the paint into those areas. If we applied this all over the armour panels, we'd change the colour of the blue, and we want to avoid this as we'll have to do lots of layering up later to correct it. So doing a recess shade might take a little bit more time initially, but it saves loads of time in the long run as we don't have to do so much tidying up. We'll probably just have a couple of mistakes here and there to tidy up. That being said, if you do make any mistakes, just thin down some Macragge Blue and use that to tidy back up. Now your Ballistus Dreadnought is more than ready to charge onto the gaming table and destroy enemy armour and elite infantry with its banks of devastating heavy weapons. However, if you'd like to see an easy way to add to this paint job, keep watching. So the last thing we're going to do is apply an edge highlight of Calgar Blue. When edge highlighting, it's entirely up to you how much or how little you want to do. You could just pick out the most prominent areas of the miniature. The main thing to consider is the consistency of your paint. We need to thin it down so that the paint glides nicely off the brush, but we don't want it too watery as it won't settle on the miniature correctly. Once we're happy with the paint consistency, we can then use the edge of our brush to glide it along the hard edges of the armour panels. This is a really quick and easy way to get a very crisp highlight. And as always, mistakes can always be tidied up with any of the previous colours. Just make sure you thin them down first. Now if you don't fancy edge highlighting this miniature, or if you've got loads of them to paint, you could dry brush this on instead. It's really up to you. Now your Ballistus Dreadnought is finished and looking awesome, ready to field those fearsome weapons on the gaming table. Now you can see that we've applied transfers and we've also based our model, and we've based it using a technical paint called Armageddon Dust. And if you'd like to learn more about technical paints, you can check out our video all about them. For more tutorials, tips and tricks, you can head to your local Warhammer store where our amazing staff will be more than happy to help, or head on over to citadelcolour.com. Well, we hope you've enjoyed the video and we'll see you next time. Bye!